What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I am bringing you an updated side deck tier list for Photon Hypernova, which is coming out very soon in the next couple of weeks. You know, people are going to be having their pre-releases and the cards are going to be very close to releasing. And yeah, I want to go over some side deck cards for the upcoming format, which, you know, the biggest change is really going to be, you know, Kashtira coming into the fray, changing the format because that deck plays very differently from many decks we currently have, and it brings a lot of new cards into the side deck that could be very useful against that matchup that may have been like less useful before. And besides, you know, the actual set Photon Hypernova coming out, if we have a ban list, it could change this as well, because if we have to prepare less for tier, potentially some of these ratings I'm going to give some of these cards could change. But with all that being said, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below along with all of our other social media links. Also, if you do enjoy this type of Yu-Gi-Oh content, you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel. I'm trying to hit 13,000 subscribers, which I'm at like 12.9k right now, so we're extremely close to hitting 13,000. So again, if you do enjoy the content, feel free to subscribe. Also, these tier lists, I include a lot of cards, but I always miss a couple. So if there's a card you wanted me to talk about or that I forgot, feel free to leave it down below, and you know, I'll be sure to like cover it in the comments and make sure it's added to the next tier list, potentially more importantly. And yeah, with all that being said, let's hop into this tier list, and we're gonna go kind of in order here. So starting with the top tier, I have meta, then I have strong picks. So meta would be things you definitely want to run, and strong picks are things you can run if like you're already playing these in the main deck and you need other side deck options, or if you just need more side deck cards you feel. Okay are cards that are good but could be outclassed but might have like a fine usage for the deck you're playing. Niche usage would be very like deck specific or situation specific that you want to run in your deck, but still have some sort of reason to be played in some situation, even though it might not be the greatest. Then we have yikes. This is, you want to stay away from the yikes tier, okay? These are not cards I would call good going into next format, but we're gonna go through the list here. And of course, this is a side deck tier list, not like a board breaker tier list or a going first tier list. I feel like it's really weird to split your side deck cards into two videos. I feel like it could be confusing for some players, and I just want to talk about all the side deck cards, because when you're building a side deck, you got to think about go first cards and go second cards. So starting off with the first card, we have Alpha. Now normally Alpha is an okay card, and even when he's bad, I would say he still has some niche usage in decks like maybe Tri-Brigade or Madolche, decks with beasts in their engine so you can get more value. Honestly, I'm going to put him in the yikes next format. My problem with Alpha is he's not great versus tier because he's going to get soul yeked like instantly. And then he's also not great versus Kashtira, because if they lock 3 of your zones going first and then you summon Alpha and then they Arise Hard him, they're locking the next 2 of your zones, and that is bad. I feel like some of these cards are just too susceptible to how Kashtira plays now. He's okay versus Sprite, so maybe you could even argue for niche usage because he is okay versus Sprite. However, I feel like there are much better cards to be playing in this slot, so I'm going to be putting him in the yikes tier. Now you'll notice Kashtira Fenrir is not actually on this list. Maybe it should be because some people opt to side deck it, but I think if you're playing it as a side deck card, it should arguably already be in your main deck right now. So he's not included, but if you guys want me to rate him on future tier lists as a side deck card, rather than how I just described, leave that down below and I may add him on the next tier list. We're going to go over Pancreatops as well. I think he's also yikes right now. I don't think it's worth playing Pancreatops. He hasn't been good versus tier limit this whole time. I don't think he's good versus Kashtira either, although a little bit better than Alpha, I would say, because Alpha's like really not good, and Pancreatops can at least chain to Arise Hearts effect. Pancreatops, again, decent versus Sprite, but I feel like these are just worse than Fenrir most of the time. Pancreatops might be like niche usage potentially and like go second decks. Yeah, I just don't feel like these cards are very good, so it's really hard for me to rate them, but I definitely think they're below the bottom. I think you could even argue okay for these, but it's almost not worth it because I think there's just better cards. Antispell next format, I'm gonna put in okay. Like, this card's been getting a lot of flack for like a long time, even though it used to be way up here in the tiers. It's definitely less good than it used to be, but I do think it's okay for, especially in some decks when you're trying to counter some of the cards on this list, like Dark Ruler No More, Swords of Concealing, you know, these powerful blowout go second cards, Lightning Storm that could get you. There are still reasons to play Antispell over some cards, so I think it's okay. A pointer I still think is like at least strong, maybe even meta. I feel like you should have one of this in your side deck. The only weakness it has is that it can't be trap tricked anymore because it's at 1, and it is, you know, bad in time, so there are some things against it. Maybe you could say strong pick, but I feel like you should have one a pointer in your side deck. It's just too powerful. Chalice is definitely a yikes. This card is extremely underpowered. There are some formats like Tri-Brigade format where this card's okay, or even Prank Kid format. It was but yeah, definitely right now we want to stay away from this. Swords of Concealing, it's tough because I feel like a lot of people, especially initially, were thinking this card could be around here when like Kashtira was, you know, first announced, or it was strong in the OCG, but we didn't have it, or people didn't know enough about it. I don't even know if I want to put it in OK, because this, I guess I'll put it in OK. This card's not completely terrible. It's going to trade 1-for-1 into a lot of decks, like Sprite will trade 1-for-1. Against Tier, it's still okay. It's good versus Tier elements to an extent. But versus Kashtira, this card is just not that great because they're just going to Arise Heart banish it. They're going to chain Arise Heart, and it's going to get banished, and it's going to do nothing. So it's okay. It's not great. I personally wouldn't play it, but it's okay. It's outclassed by another card on this tier list. Cosmic is interesting because I don't think back row removal is actually going to be that strong into the next format, but I do think as far as back row removal is concerned, Cosmic's one of the best ones. So I'm going to put Cosmic in strong pick as far as if you want to play back row removal, it's one of the best. Labyrinth is getting a pretty big boost in Photon Hypernova, so that's something to consider. And I think Cosmic's good versus that deck because you can chain it to any trap they activate to target another trap, and then they don't get their lady set right then unless they can chain something else. So yeah, as far as back row removal concerned, it's strong, but I don't think back row removal is that good going into next format. You're really only hitting Fluanderies to an extent, and you're hitting back row decks like Labyrinth, and it's okay versus Tier Limit, which is why I'm still putting it here. Dark Hole, I'm going to put niche usage. I don't think this card is good. However, depending on how popular Ibly is, this card is at least good versus Ibly. Now, the problem is against Sprite, they're just going to Toad negate it, and you're not going to get Ibly off your field that way, so it's not a failsafe. But if Kashtira is giving you Ibly, it's a little better in that regard. Now, this card I don't think is good versus Kashtira all the time, although it can be okay. It doesn't out Shangri-Ira because he can protect himself, but also a Rise Heart can banish, or you can banish the Goliath from your extra deck, Infinitrack Goliath, and then equip it with a Rise Heart, and then even he is protected from Dark Hole. So I actually don't like Dark Hole and Raigeki as much as other side deck cards or board breakers in this format. So I'm going to put niche usage more for like Ibly and the potential that it could be good. But I guess I'll talk about Raigeki. I actually think Raigeki is less good than Dark Hole right now. Is that a strong statement to make? Is that just wrong? Am I just trying to make a hot take for no reason? No, I really think that because Dark Hole can out Ibly and Raigeki cannot, there's like more reason to play Dark Hole almost. But again, it depends on how popular Ibly is next meta. And I also think Tier Limit can use Dark Hole a little better because there are situations where like you can pop your own tiers with it, and that's funny. But Raigeki is the better card overall. But I feel like this niche usage is for Tier Limit and Ibly, while Raigeki is overall just not good. I think there's just a lot. Maybe we could put them both in okay, though. Like, I don't know. I don't think Raigeki is that good. This is a yikes. This card never turned out to be anything. In fact, this will probably be removed from the tier list after this. Like, this card just never lived up to the hype. It's called Earth-Shattering Event, for anyone wondering. Cara, I just think Cara could be okay to strong pick. The thing about Cara is, if there's a situation where they don't activate Shangri-Ira and you can't like Cara before they lock your zone, she's useless. And I feel like I'm talking about Kashtira a lot because they are the biggest change post Photon Hypernova. So that's mostly what this list is about how we're building our side decks for the format we've been dealing with, but also going into Kashtira. And this card I think gets a lot better. I think this card is going to see more usage than it has in the past. I still don't think it's the perfect format for it. Like, I still think it's weird versus Sprite because Totally Awesome is sending himself anyways. I think it's weird versus Tier Limit. It's not always great. It can be okay versus Tier. And I think there are some decks that can play this better than others where it's okay, but I'm just going to put it in okay, not strong pick, even though it's getting better than it has been, but Dark Ruler, Okay, I'm gonna put Dark Ruler in niche usage, or maybe okay. Like, Dark Ruler is great versus Sprite, which will still be a deck, and it's good versus Fluandereeze, which I've been mentioning less on this tier list, but you definitely have to consider, which is another thing this card is good against, is Fluandereeze, and I mentioned it for Cosmic, but this card's okay versus Fluandereeze and Sprite, so I think it's an okay card. It is mediocre versus Tearlament at best. It's actually, I would say it's bad versus Tearlament, and it is trash versus, like, Kashtira. You're gonna negate a Rise Heart, which stops a banish, but if the zones are the problem here, then, like, you really need to play cards that out Shangri-Era, because locking your zones, if you get locked, you're done. You're out of the game, right? So I think playing cards that stop that from happening are the better cards in the current format, or the next format, I should say, and I feel like Dark Ruler's just okay. Alright guys, little post cut from the future. I was talking about Dark Ruler no more, and I said it's trash versus Kashtira, but honestly looking at it, I don't think it's actually trash. I think when you hit a Rise Heart, you're actually doing a lot. Like, you're stopping a banish, and you're stopping his macro effect. If they have Diabolus, you're stopping him from banishing. And I think that could actually be okay, so I'm glad I put it in the okay tier. I still don't think it's amazing. I think there's other cards that might be better, but I think I didn't give Dark Ruler enough credit in this spot, so I just wanted to say that post-editing. Droplet, I'll say niche usage. I think Droplet is just weaker than Dark Ruler next format because it costs more cards, but there are decks where Droplet's good. Like Tri-Brigade Sprite, I have a list where I play Droplet because it's insane. Some versions of Sprite where you're playing a lot of Angler, I think Droplets can be good there too because you can discard Angler. But overall, I'm going to say niche usage for Droplets. Now, Book of Eclipse, I'm going to say either strong pick or meta. Here's the thing. I'm going to put in strong pick because I think it's less good than another card on this list, but it also just depends on what deck you're playing. And I think next format, Ash Blossom is going to come back in a big way, and quite a few decks. It's already being played in Sprite. But if Book of Eclipse becomes very meta, right? Like say Book of Eclipse is up here, Ash Blossom is going to be very strong as a way to defend against this powerful board breaker. The fact that this card can be Ash Blossomed, it makes me like it less than I would like just looking at it on paper, because on paper this card's insane, but I'm gonna put it in strong pick because I think it's very easily countered by a card like Ash Blossom, which is generally okay anyways, and now you're able to run it as a defensive card against board breakers. Like, I don't really want to side a board breaker that loses to Ash Blossom. That kind of feels bad, and if I'm relying on it and I get ashed when I'm trying to beat a Kashtira board, but I guess, like, it's still better than this. So I think this card's really strong. I think there's going to be a lot of people playing it. I think you should play it if you don't want to play anything else. But I'm not ready to say it's, like, 100% needs to be in your side deck. I'm not so confident on that. But maybe if there's nothing really else great on this tier list, it probably should. Eradicator as a side deck card for certain decks against certain matchups, it's okay. Evenly matched? Oh, this one's tough. I'm gonna put it in strong pick. Here's my thing about evenly matched and why it might just be okay. Against Sprite, it's just negated by Toad or Carrot. It's not that great. In fact, I just wouldn't side it in versus Sprite unless I have nothing else. Against Tearlament, the problem is Crime, but if you have two go second cards, then suddenly evenly matched can be very strong. And against Kashtira, if your problem again is Shangri-Era, this card is not gonna out that. That's gonna be what they keep, and they're gonna lock the rest of your zones, right? So alright guys, Aaron from the future again. I've had to do this twice this video, which is very rare, but I don't like how I sort of explained evenly match in this situation either. I go on a little rant here about how, like, it's not gonna stop how your zones are locked, but honestly, if they have no go first card to protect them from evenly, then it would clear everything but Shangri-Era. You're still going to have two zones to work with, and that's usually enough for most decks to out Shangri-Era, so evenly in that sense I think is actually okay. One thing I mentioned for Dark Hole and Raigeki in that argument that I didn't mention for evenly match, which I should have, is evenly's strength will be determined by how popular Ibly is. If Ibly is very strong, I actually don't like evenly match because it is very, very difficult to do something with it and still use evenly, like especially against Kashtira where they might not have anything in attack position. You're gonna have to play with that Ibly, and then evenly is terrible. So I feel like the rest of my arguments with evenly is fine enough, but I should have mentioned Ibly when talking about this card, and I'm just gonna use this cut in instead of the giant rant I went on that just really wasn't something I wanted in the video. So yeah, here you go. So I guess I'll say evenly matched is a strong pick. It's okay. Feather Duster, generally okay as far as back row removal is concerned. Kaijus, I'm gonna say they're okay. I think Kaijus out like at least one problem Shangri-Ira has. The Godarla specifically is good versus birds still, so that's fine. It can out a threat. Maybe you could say niche usage for just go second decks, but I feel like especially in a next format where Kaiju type cards are at least solid, I feel like the Kaijus have gotten a little bit of a boost. I'll say they're alright. I think they're better than a lot of these cards to an extent because there's less ways to protect from Kaijus. But I feel like maybe even I could put it in niche usage just because there are better cards than this for sure. Goes in match as a go first card is okay. As a go first card, maybe it's a strong pick. I think if you can play Gozen, it's solid because it really hits Kashtira really hard. To an extent, depends on how they start. But yeah, if they start Unicorn, his card's insane, right? Now, Lava Golem. Or actually, before we get to Lava Golem, let's rank Rivalry. I think Rivalry is still an okay pick for going first just because... is this, like, worse than? I think it's still strong. Like, it hits Tearlament enough. Like, it can be very good versus Tearlament. And if your deck can play either of these, I think they're pretty strong go first picks. Not like the best thing in the world, but I wouldn't say meta, but as far as a go first pick, I think they're pretty good. And then TC Boo, I think is also okay. Maybe these cards, well, I said okay, but I'm gonna put it in okay. Like, I feel like this card can be played around decently enough. I don't know, there's a lot of lines where Kashtira can't really play around this either, right? Because they gotta put multiple Psychics on board. But can't you just, like, Rise Heart past that? Or have, like, a different level 7 extender? I don't know, man. Like, is this card okay? I'm gonna put this card in strong pick. Because it's still very good versus Sprite, still very good versus Fluandereeze, and it's mid versus Tearlament. But honestly, I think this is an okay go first card if you can play it. Any of these are a strong pick if your deck can fit any of these, I think, as a go first card. These are like, or maybe they're all okay. I'm gonna say they're all okay. They're not amazing, but they're not bad. But I feel like there's not a lot of great go first cards right now anyways, so I don't know. Talking about Lava Golem, I'm putting him in meta. But again, this is like if your deck can play it, which technically every deck right now I think is a very solid deck to play Lava Golem in the meta except Fluandereeze. And then this card also is weird versus Fluandereeze, so you're going to want different cards versus that deck. However, this card versus Kashtira is great, versus Tearlament it's great, versus Sprite it's great. This card is insane, but again, if you're playing a normal summon deck, you can't run this card. So, for every deck that isn't normal summon reliant, I'm putting it in meta, which even Labyrinth is going to play this. Every deck but Fluandereeze is able to play this card, and I think they should. Like, to me, Lava Golem's one of the best board breakers going into next format. Personally, I love this card. Now, there are some decks, again, that can't play it, but I think this card is worthy of the meta slot. Light Imprisoning, yikes. Shadow Imprisoning as a go first, I don't think is bad. Is it a strong pick? No, I'll put it in okay. I feel like every time I think this card is a strong pick, it never gets played. It's never good enough to run because it's weak to certain things. But on paper, going first, if you're not playing a dark deck, Shadow Imprisoning shuts out a lot of what Sprite want to do. It shuts off Gigantic, Blue, and Jet. That's huge. It shuts off all of Tearlaments. It shuts off a Rise Heart. I believe a Rise Heart is dark and not fire. Shangri-Ira is fire, but I'm pretty sure a Rise Heart is dark. And stopping him is huge. So, like, I don't know. This card's, like, pretty solid. I'm going to put it in okay. Lightning Storm, I'm going to put in okay as well. I mean, maybe it's... Yeah, I'm going to put it in okay. Maybe the top of okay. I think it's really solid for back row removal, but also it's good versus Fluandereeze. And, like, against Sprite, it doesn't do much. It's just trading with Toad. Against Tearlament, it's trading with probably nothing. Maybe Crime. Versus Kashtira, again, for the reasons I say Dark Hole and Raigeki aren't that good, I don't think this card's not very good against them either, but at least this can hit back row, unlike these cards. So I feel like if Feather Duster is okay, this card's at least okay, if not better. And this is as far as back row removal concerned, right? Like, I don't think back row removal is that great next format because there's not a lot of back row decks except Labyrinth, but most side decks are going to want to throw in at least a playset of some type of back row removal, and I do think Cosmic's a little better, but Lightning Storm does more. It's higher impact, just less good versus certain things. Like, I wouldn't like this as much versus Fluandereeze to hit back row, but they're monsters for sure. I hope that I explained that well enough. Ultimate Slayer, man, I love this card. I still think that ever since Power of the Elements, I've wanted this card to be super good. The problem is Elf. Elf is 100% the problem with this card right now. Until Elf is banned, if Elf is banned, I'm putting this card up here, okay? If we ever ban Elf, this card is goated. Now, I actually do want to put this card it's weird right now. So, especially because our Rise Heart is macro, this card is terrible versus Kashtira. Otherwise, this card would be great versus that matchup. Actually, I'll put this in niche usage. This, I think right now, and specifically in decks where you have a lot of extra deck that you want in your grave, like, I feel like Floowandereeze can play this card and have it be okay, and some going second decks, some decks can use this card, but because a Rise Heart is macro, you can't use this card effectively. Because of Sprite Elf in both like Tearlament and Sprite, this card, you have to run the Evil Twin package, and then even then it's weird because you have to run the Evil Twin package, which I don't like as much. Versus Floowandereeze, it's garbage. So like even when it should be good, Konami's making it not good with like a Rise Heart being macro, and Sprite Elf is just the worst. If Sprite Elf didn't exist, I'm telling you guys, I would have this card in meta. This card would be insane. Konami just banned Sprite Elf. I didn't say that on my ban list prediction, but if they ban Sprite Elf, you know, this card's insane. So, alright, Solemn Judgment. Now, this is going to be interesting. I almost always put this in okay because it's usually like the baseline for what I'm doing, but because there's so many like blowout go second cards right now, I don't know, I almost feel like it should be a strong pick, but I'm going to put it in okay. I feel like Solemn Judgment is always the baseline as far as a go first card is concerned. Now, all of my go first side decks are almost always like Judgment and a Pointer, but I don't know, I feel like there's no go first card that is just stand out insane right now. Maybe I'm not looking at this list correctly, but I feel like there haven't been insane go first cards in a long time. I feel like Judgment has been one of the best, and then if your deck can play these, they're solid, but I feel like we have no go first cards that will shut out the opponent right now unless it's a Crazy Floodgate, and even then, Crazy Floodgates right now aren't that good versus every deck, which is I think what's making it really weird. Maybe Summon Limit should be on this list as well, because I think Summon Limit in some decks is okay going into next format. I don't know, go first cards are rough. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite go first card is for the side deck going into next format. I know a lot of you are watching this to sort of get a gauge on the next format, and you probably don't know, but for those that have an idea of what they want to side next format, what is your favorite go first card? I think a Pointer is still the best that there is, and some people want this card banned still, which is fair enough, but I really like Judgment. I think Judgment is actually better next format than it's been in a while, but I like Judgment as the baseline go first card, and we compare everything else to Solemn Judgment. Sphere Mode, I'm going to put in Strong Pick. An issue is Kashtira can play around this if they see you're playing it, but it's like, this is just higher impact Lava Golem if things do go your way. I personally prefer to side Lava Golem in a lot of things, simply because he's more consistent. I'm sure they're going to have 2 monsters, but some people play around having 3, right? So, then again, this is higher impact Lava Golem, so take that how you will. Super Poly, what do people think about Super Poly next format? I still think this card is just, it's pretty solid versus Sprite. I'm going to put it in Strong Pick. It's a solid board breaker if your deck has extra room, or if you're playing tier. I think this card's okay. I think a big problem is it doesn't play well into Kashtira to an extent, unless you can summon a fire monster. But yeah, it's just not, there's no way to use it versus Kashtira, right? It's okay versus Sprite, it sucks versus Floowandereeze, it's okay versus Tearlament. You know, I'm gonna actually put it in okay. I don't think it's that great next format. Maybe I'm missing something, but a lot of things, it's actually, in my opinion, almost a better go first side deck next format, because you can stop a lot of plays before they make their end board where this card's good, like even versus Sprite, versus Birds especially. But then past that, it's not great, but I wouldn't side this going first, so that eliminates that argument as well. I think this card's okay if your deck can play it, but not the best. If it worked better versus Kashtira, I would like it more. Unless I'm missing something. Is there like a fusion that you can make with the Kashtira board? You could take Fenrir and... No, you can't even do that. No, I don't think this card's that amazing next format, but this card is disgusting. I think this card's super strong, and if you find a good position with it, it's great. Silent Graveyard, I actually think this card's okay as a go first card. It kind of shuts off tier a little bit. Think about like this card putting in your side deck versus tier. I'm gonna put it in niche usage, just if you really want to side deck versus tier a lot. This card's okay because, I mean, it can hit tier going first or second, so it's a pretty high value card into Tearlament. It's okay. It's nothing great. I'll put niche usage. And Twin Twister is okay. I feel like a lot of back removal right now is just fine. Maybe niche usage. For decks that like discarding or need more back removal, I would say this card is worse than Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, and Cosmic. The only time I think this card is better is if your deck really likes having discards like Angler, Tri-Brigade monsters, or Burning Abyss, for example. But it's also better than Cosmic versus exactly Floowandereeze, so I think if you're siding for Flunder specifically, this card is niche usage in that regard. I'm noticing some cards are missing, like the new Gravekeeper spell. Maybe that should be on here as a side deck card, although I don't think it's the best side deck card. Holy moly, there are some side deck cards on here that I don't have that I should include, which would be Triple Tactics Talent, which I think should be in the main deck. Personally, and not a side deck card, and then Tasking, which I also think should be in the main deck if you're playing it, but Tasking more or less could be side deck. So I'm going to add a picture of Tasking somewhere in this tier list where I think, like, where would I put Tasking? I think if you're siding it, it could be meta, so I'm going to put Tasking in meta, and I'll just put the picture there, like I said, because I didn't add it in this tier list, but I think it's more of a main deck card if you're going to play it, but I've definitely seen people side deck it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just lack of experience with the card in my case, because it is a lot better going second than it is going first in a lot of situations, but a lot of people main it. So yeah, I'll put it in meta. I think it's really solid. Let me know what you guys think down below. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the tier list. I'll be having more this week of like hand traps. Hand traps aren't this list because I have a separate hand trap tier list. And I'll be having a best decks post Photon Hypernova as well. So stay tuned for that. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.